I actually want to start. So Dane County Sheriff's Office, they got requests from schools in their jurisdiction to increase some visible presence at their schools. Have there been any similar requests from families or any of the MSD schools for added presence from police?
No official requests, but obviously when something like this happens, we make all our officers aware. We do bulletins and we make everyone aware that we want increased presence and want the officers who traditionally work that area anyway to step up their patrols and to surveil their schools. I think it's certainly unfortunate that we have to do that, and we have a lot of problems that we need to fix. Parents should not have to be worried about calling the police for extra patrols. I think that our police department, certainly under my administration, has always been a big proponent of school safety. As you know, Naomi, I was a school resource officer. I was a public school teacher. As a public school teacher, I had the opportunity to take a gun off a student before, and that was a rare occurrence in '97 or whenever it was. And now here we are seeing people running into schools, which should be the safest place that we have in our community, and children not being safe.
I suspected that you'd bring up SROs, but quite frankly, there were 2 SROs at the school yesterday. There was an SRO at the Parkland shooting. In many active shooting scenarios, there are officers already at the school and people still had to die. Why do we think SROs are the answer?
How do you measure what doesn't happen? How do you measure the difference between 18 souls versus 28 souls? These are high-powered weapons. They're assault weapons. They're weapons that are used in combat. The shooter last night was shot and killed by a police officer. If he or she or they is not there, then it's 1828. How are we putting dollar signs and numbers on lives? The answer is we don't need to do that ever. And whether we prevent one shooting or one person, it's worth it. And we have to be more concerned about people in this city, in this country, than we are about power, than we are about politics, and than we are about our position.
Is there any data that you can point to in terms of SROs reducing the likelihood of these sorts of mass events from happening?
Again, you can't measure what doesn't happen. When I was an SRO, I had a student who wrote a manifesto to come to school and shoot up the school. Now, about 20 years prior to me being an SRO, a student came to school, this was Grimsley High School in North Carolina, you can look it up, and shot and killed the principal, okay, in cold blood. And here we are 20 years later, I'm an SRO, and we get alerted from a student, by the way, who was concerned about safety, and we were able to stop that. Now, what is that worth to you? In his manifesto, the first thing he was going to do was to kill me. That's what he wrote in his notebook. And I will tell you, it was not going to go down that way, because I took my job as an SRO very seriously. My job was to, number one, establish positive relationships, and number two, protect the students at all costs, even if it meant my life. And we're playing these games about, well, what does the data show? What does the data show? What do our instincts show? Is a person more or less likely to run into a school if there's someone who will stop them? And so I just reject the notion that SROs don't prevent crimes, because some crimes happen. There are people who lock their doors every day and their houses are still broken into. Should we ban locks on doors? Should we just say, you know what, don't sell any more security systems because people's houses still get broken into? I just reject that idea. I think we can provide some level of security, and as someone who is a parent and someone who cares deeply about our children, I care deeply about education, I will be willing to make that investment.
Do you think gun laws or the lack thereof play any role here?
No, because this is what you mentioned, research. So if you read Sense and No Sense About Crime and Drugs by Samuel Walker, it's probably in its 9th edition now. It's one of the greatest books about what works and what doesn't work. They've talked about these two approaches. One approach is a liberal approach, and that approach is reducing guns. The other approach is a conservative approach, which says give everybody a gun and allow people to have guns. Well, the let everyone have gun experiment, we already have that. The Small Arms Survey out of Switzerland states that there are over 200 million handguns in America and another 300 million long guns and rifles. So we already have that experience. The other experience of the liberal approach is to reduce the ability to buy a gun, reduce the ability to wait, have background checks, have waiting periods and things of that nature, and that's all great. But how does it account for the black market? And so there's a traditional black market. I will tell you, in almost any city in America, if you have the money, you can get a weapon or get someone to steal or take a weapon from you, which is why I tell people all the time, do not leave your weapons in your vehicles. Lock your vehicles at all times, and vehicles make horrible gun safes, because that's what some people are looking for, because they can't readily buy a weapon. And I think we need to look into how he was able at 18 years old to purchase these weapons.
It was legal.
I understand that it was legal, but is it right? We have a lot of things that are legal, but is it the right thing to do? We have to rise above that. And sometimes it requires an evolution of our thinking. What was written in 1789 may not be appropriate for 2022 unless we're okay with kids being killed.
You're referencing the Second Amendment?
Yes, I am.
So I'm hearing, I just want to be clear, because I don't want to misrepresent your position, because I asked about gun laws and whether that plays a role here, and your first response was no, but the way you finished your answer, I'm hearing you believe they do play some role.
I believe we should look at what role they play before we make a decision. That's something we don't do a lot of in America. We make a decision without thinking about the impact. As you know, going back to the original subject, we don't have SROs. And so now we're in this experiment trying to figure out, is that working? Or what was the replacement, and is that in place? And if not, should we wait until that is in place, or how long should we wait until that is in place? So I am always a proponent of evidence-based practices. And what that means is apply some method to determine what impact this decision will have on the community.
So do you think there's any value in looking at a country like Australia, which had a mass shooting in 1996? They toughened their gun laws and they haven't had a mass shooting ever since?
I think so, but I will be perfectly honest with you. America does not have a history of looking to other countries for advice. So that's just a fact of where we are.
I'm not trying to have a reaction, but that was a good quote at any rate. I want to pivot real quick before we finish. There's something I've heard from parents so often this morning, is when they talk to their kids about the mass shooter training that they experience in schools. There's almost this sense of, does it even help? I know it does help to have those tools in that moment, but the examples are given of, you have an 18-year-old who grew up with these same shooter trainings, the same shooter drills that all of our kids are experiencing. And actually, just a parent in our own organization was posting on social media this morning about how her teenage daughter told her this morning, she's like, yeah, we've kind of dropped a lot of that stuff, because essentially if it's someone from our own classroom, our own school, they would already know the drills and how to get around them. Is there any way that we should be looking to modify how we prepare our kids? Yeah,
I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think that active shooters think about the execution of safety when they come in. I think they come in, they look for victims, they probably close their eyes, and they pull the trigger. When I was younger, we had Columbine, and we saw what that looked like firsthand. And for me, it was the first time seeing that. And I didn't see anything in that, I think, that would suggest that, that they had this high level of execution. They were kind of walking through, looking for people, looking under desks and things of that nature. But since then, we have developed some procedures, the run, duck, and hide that the FBI put out before, barricading yourself in the classroom, the green and red placards that hopefully we still do that, every teacher will have those next to the door. If there's an active shooter, you put the green or the red underneath that, so when officers are coming in and we're looking for a bad guy, we see green, we know that everything's okay, we can move on to the next thing. Some of those things I think are good, but what we're seeing is not a level of sophistication. What we're seeing is a level of desperation. And it bothers me, because that's worse than execution.
Allow me to finish with a little bit of a personal question.
Sure.
I know you're a parent. I know you have girls, or I think 2 daughters.
2 daughters and a son.
Sorry, 3.
That's okay.
On a personal level, what's going through your mind when you talk to your kids before they go to school on a morning like this morning? I don't know if you have time to, but I mean.
Yeah, what I tell my kids is to always be safe. And both of my kids that are in school now, Addison, who's in the 5th grade, and Aiden, who's in the 7th grade, like, I know them, right? They would assume a leadership role. It's no question in my mind. I just know who they are. My son is incredibly brave, and he sees himself as this gentleman, and he would do whatever he can to help people. He's the kid that holds doors for people for as you were halfway in the mall and he's still standing there. He's that kid. And so I just told them to be safe, listen to what the adults are saying, and if the adults are not able to tell you what to do, then barricade yourself and take cover.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to add that, when will thoughts and prayers be not enough? When will my thoughts and prayers go out to insert whatever, be so shocking to our conscience that we actually do something? And I look on my Twitter feed, I look on my Instagram feed, and it's my thoughts and prayers, my thoughts and prayers. It's like, wash, rinse, and repeat. We have to move past that. We really do. And maybe it's a commission to look at active shooters. Maybe it's a presidential commission appointed with experts on both sides of the argument, the gun lobby side and the gun control side, to come together and say, hey, what do we agree on? And what will be the right thing for our country? I think we can protect the constitutional rights of citizens, but again, you have the right to freedom of speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You have the right to the Second Amendment, but we don't expect you to come into a school and use an automatic weapon with unlimited capacity and kill people.